Welcome to Show Me the Proof, Get to the Point, the B2B marketing podcast where we show you the proof in the form of case studies and success stories. And we get straight to the point with your hosts and founders of Proofpoint Marketing, Mike and Gabby Grinberg.
Welcome, everyone, to Show Me the Proof, Get to the Point. Today on the show, we have another guest from across the pond, Alex Lowe. Alex is the head of enterprise strategy and operations at Lately, a social media management platform that uses artificial intelligence to automatically create dozens of pre-tested social posts from long-form content as well as videos and podcasts. Alex is also the host and founder of a sales podcast called Death of a Salesman. Very clever title there. And if you're not following him on LinkedIn, go check him out. Give him a follow. Send him a request. I hope that's okay, Alex. Yep. Because he has a great segment on Friday that I've thoroughly been enjoying called #AskAlex. And it's just these quick, 2 to 3 minute, sometimes less, videos that he puts together for his audience around selling and messaging and all sorts of other good stuff. And there's tons of great pop culture references, which I love. So Alex, welcome to the show.
At minimum, you will be entertained.
Yeah.
Delighted to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, this show is all about the proof, and we have some pretty phenomenal stats to share, or you have some pretty phenomenal stats. You were part of and orchestrated a social selling campaign that resulted in 4 million. I'm going to say that again. 4 million quid. Is that all right? Can I use the word quid?
4.9.
You can use the word quid, yeah.
4.9 million quid in pipeline. And $500,000 in net new revenue. So those that are listening, they know that I like to do accents. And we had another guest from England, and we did some Irish and Scottish accents. And
we will not do that again this time. So let's let Alex tell us about how he was able to drive almost 5 million in pipeline through social selling.
Mike is all about getting to the point. So let's show us the proof, Alex. Tell us more about this campaign. You were the man in charge. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, I suddenly thought that Dick Van Dyke from Mary Poppins had come onto the podcast there, Gabby. I mean, wow.
I told you we like that. We like to have fun on the show.
Is that a compliment or
It's a compliment, I think.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll take it.
Right, let's get back on track. I can see Mike getting frustrated here. So I led the first ever social selling program globally in the commercial real estate sector for an organization called Jones Lang LaSalle. This is according to LinkedIn. They did case studies on me on their website if you want to verify it. And it was the first kind of foray into Sales Navigator and social. And what was interesting, it was working with 150 surveyors. So realtors, if you will, where their primary function is to execute upon real estate deals, not actually sell. And this was back in 2016, 2015, 2016. So this whole concept of social selling was still relatively new. And the concept of actually building social media into their day-to-day behaviors in a heavily siloed organization was new as well. So it was quite a brave thing to do. I had to convince the UK board to part with a lot of money back then to do this, with kind of no real proof point other than trust me that this is going to work. What I learned very quickly that when we were launching it is that we had to make it really specific to the audience. LinkedIn were brilliant at kind of helping, but LinkedIn came with just an overview. If you're looking for this type of person or this type of person, then this is how you do this. And I had a lot of people on kind of instant chat behind the scenes going, we don't look for sales directors and marketing directors. So how is this relevant to me? And the other kind of challenge that which we had, which I'm happy to kind of go through on a deeper dive, is the ability to prove it and the ability to join systems together. So to actually track that action, be it that connection, that blog post, that piece of marketing, which was supported by the marketing team, which then disseminated through a personal channel, led to a conversation, which then led to a pitch opportunity, which then had some value to it. and then led to actual money in the bank, especially as some of the deal cycles were 18 months to 2 years long. So when you get into that kind of world, it's really quite hard to prove, inverted commas, that social was the influenced it rather than being the cause of it. Well, but without that thing never would have happened.
Yeah.
So I've got 3 questions for you, and we can take in whichever order you want. First question is, you mentioned convincing the boards. I'd love to know, especially back then. Now it's maybe a little bit easier, but back in 2016, 2015, like you said, this wasn't really social selling wasn't really a thing just yet. How did you convince the board? Another question I've got is, you mentioned, convincing the board to part with a lot of money. I'm curious, what was the money spent on? Was it tools? Was it headcount? Was it training, etc.? And then last but not least is, you mentioned measurement. Again, was it tools? What was the measurement methodology? And how were you able to actually do, whether we want to call it direct attribution or not? So take it whichever order you want.
You might have to remind me of some of the questions.
Yeah.
Whatever time it is on a Friday afternoon. So let's take convincing the board. So it was relatively easy. So our chief exec, he's not chief exec anymore. He's moved onwards and upwards within the organization, but he had stood up earlier that year in front of the entire UK business saying, we are going to be a digital business that happens to provide real estate services. I had then already proven that a particular team was going to leave a deal opportunity on the table because we didn't know anybody at that organization. I did a quick check into LinkedIn and saw straight out of the gate that the then chief exec of Europe had a connection to a senior partner at this hedge fund in London. I messaged him saying, hi, Kristen, you don't know who I am, but this is what we're trying to do. How well do you know this person? Could you facilitate an introduction? We got the introduction. The pitch opportunity happened. So it was £40,000 sterling pitch. So I think that's sort of 60,000 US, give or take, pitch. We lost. That's not the fault of social. That's not the fault of that introduction failing. That's further down the sales process. So I then went to the board going, how many other deals are we literally leaving money on the table? Because there's this assumption when we know there's a business opportunity, we go to our immediate network. And if through our immediate network, there's no way in, it's too difficult, I can't be bothered. When in fact, I think back at the time, they had 50,000 employees around the world. Imagine if we could activate that network, and how many, you times that 40,000 by 50,000 employees, that suddenly becomes a far more meaningful number in terms of potential pipeline. And this is the key thing about social and social selling. It's about revenue pipeline generation or digital prospecting. So they were like, okay, I kind of get that. That makes sense. How much is this all going to cost? And then I said, well, I wanted to go really big in terms of licenses, and the main cost was primarily around Sales Navigator licenses. Initially, we eventually kind of agreed on the 150 in the UK, because you kind of need that number to get the scale to be able to leverage the virtual network that Sales Navigator creates to kind of shortcut those hidden connections, if you will. But then also enable to run this across different service lines, because different service lines have different, buyer personas. They have different deal cycles, different approaches to things. So again, I wanted to be able to kind of get a mix of the different type of deal, if you will, and deal cycle to kind of learn from there. So the money was being spent on the technology, if you will, Mike. What the board then pushed back to me, though, was, well, hang on a second, Alex. I get the concept of the opportunity that is potentially out there, but you're really good at LinkedIn. Was I think what they said to me. What if the rest of the people, aren't good at LinkedIn? And my view is, well, we have to start somewhere. The CRM internal transformation program is just taking too long, too difficult. This is a way to kind of shortcut that potential behavior change required in the technology deployment. Because the beauty with LinkedIn as a SaaS product, all I need is the internet and some computers, and that's it. I don't need IT involved at all. So we took it. If anything, it was the money, once they'd understood the opportunity out there, became less of an issue. It was then but this is going to fail because behaviorally we're not in the right place. And back to my point, I said to the guy, the then CEO, I said, but you stood up in front of the entire UK business saying we're going to be a digital company. So we have to start somewhere. Otherwise, we'll be 6 months down the line still having this.
That's actually, I want to pause there really quickly. I think that's something I want to highlight is you already have a CEO that's saying we're going to be a digital first company, which is really important because what you're doing is you're having a marketing strategy that ties back to business strategy versus you're not fighting an uphill battle like that. The business strategy has already been put out there and you're technically going back, well, okay, well, this is what we're doing. We're turning this into a digital company. So I'm just following whatever the business strategy is, which I think it's really, really important because a lot of the time marketers will try to do something that doesn't follow business strategy or fights against it. It doesn't mean it's wrong per se, but it's just that number one, it's so much harder to sell through, and two, it might not make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So it certainly helped. But then I think when I started to kind of challenge the fact that you said this, and they were like, "Oh crap, we're actually doing this." I'm like, "Well, yeah." That's the whole point of this.
Can't take it back now, right?
You're the one that committed this, and he did. He was a brilliant leader, and kudos to the board. The attribution piece. So the main spend, Mike, was on technology, was on the tools, if you will. The hardest. What was that? That's question one I've answered. I think I've answered question two.
You've answered two of them. The last one was measurements. I think we're moving right through them.
That was hard. Measurement. The only way we could do it was surveys. Was quarterly surveys because we didn't have the sync into CRM. And if we did have the sync into CRM, the CRM behavior, i.e. use of it, was just god awful. So it wouldn't have helped in any shape or form.
And it still wouldn't be perfect because if somebody saw something and then they later came through the site, it would show up in your CRM as organic anyway. It wouldn't show up as social.
Exactly. So it was surveys, and I will fully admit I was terrified of the first survey going out. I didn't want to preempt people. I didn't want to kind of wall them up, going, "Please be nice," because I put my neck out on the line, and it was crafted in a way to talk about how you're using Sales Nav, how you're using LinkedIn, how has social helped start business conversations, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and then try and attribute some pipeline opportunity to
Was the survey internal or external?
Internal. So just surveying
internal to the sellers, saying, "Hey, what are you seeing from this activity?"
In simple terms, how has this tool helped you generate business opportunity, and then what aspect of it? And then can you attribute some pipeline value to that? What LinkedIn were trying to get quite cute with, though, in terms of what the value the program was bringing. There was one outlier deal worth 3.9 million. So they based the 150 licenses on that 3.9 million outlier in terms. I was like, no. That's an outlier, not a god. Let's just rein it back a little bit in terms of an average deal size of more.
What were the average deal sizes, out of curiosity?
Is anything from it could be £20,000, £20,000, one product up to typically kind of mid hundreds. Is where they were. So the first survey went out blind, if you will, no kind of preempting, and it came back positive. So if anybody looks at the case study on the website, that's the halfway point. So all the numbers that LinkedIn are citing, we're at the halfway point of the program, whereas the $500,000 net new and the 4.9 mil pipe was after the full 12 months.
So I want to ask a question here. So, this campaign was started back in 2015, 2016.
Yeah.
We all know that social selling wasn't a thing back then.
Mm-hmm.
How did you know? What were some early indicators to you or some leading examples to say, yep, this is what we're going to do? What gave you the impetus to unleash your team on LinkedIn? How did you even come up with that idea, or where did you get the idea from?
So, I'm ex-recruitment, so I've been on LinkedIn for almost as long as LinkedIn's been around, 15 years for me. LinkedIn's 18th birthday, I think it was a couple of weeks ago. And then before I came in to join JLL, Jack Hanratty, big shout out to him. He started me on this journey from LinkedIn. He came in to sell the dream that was Sales Navigator in my previous organization. So I'd already known that LinkedIn is a place to go and generate business, but from more of a recruitment angle, if you will. And it was Sales Navigator then started on this journey of social selling, because what Sales Navigator enables organizations to do is to unlock that virtual network. And that's then where the really obvious easy wins are, because we all know that a referral is the best route into starting a business conversation. Then it's around the broader piece around then how do you use your brand, your network, and content from a marketing perspective to then kind of drive that either remaining front of mind through existing accounts, upsell, cross-sell, land and expand, or driving net new. So I knew that it worked. I backed myself for it to to work, and business had employed me to come and do something a little bit different. So yeah, it was, I'm not going to lie, it was scary as hell, but I knew that if I could just unlock some of that network, then the rest would start to follow. But simple things like our head of service office, so back then created a new division, kind of service office. He wrote his first article on LinkedIn about we've got a new service office offering. So pushed that out organically, which was picked up by 2 existing customers. And that kind of begged the question, dare I say it, back to marketing, going, well, hang on a second. We are marketing this new service to apparently our clients, but no one's picking up on it. So how come a post that's gone out organically into Dan's network has generated 2 business opportunities worth £50,000? Which then started to, because you say, I'm on the sales side of the fence rather than the marketing side of the fence back then. I now straddle both. It just started to help kind of change the internal conversation a little bit. But dare I say, a very good marketing team, but they were big message, big brand, big kind of that side of things. Whereas what I was focusing on is the one-to-one conversation, the one-to-one conversations to generate business opportunity.
Well, and especially in an industry like commercial real estate, that's, the as far as I understand it, those are, handshake deals, if you will, right? You got to see the person face to face and shake hands, sign a piece of paper kind of thing. Yeah.
Very, very, very relationship driven, which sometimes to the detriment of individuals. But yeah, it's we kind of know who you are. It's more the relationship. Absolutely bang on, Mike.
What were some of the initial challenges that you faced when executing this campaign?
What's LinkedIn? I can't remember my password. This is a complete waste of time. How do I update some real, what I hadn't necessarily anticipated is that for some people we were coming from a very, very low base just to get them up and running on LinkedIn, let alone getting kind of more sophisticated around what such a powerful tool as Sales Navigator could do. And what was also interesting is that the HR team had their view on so who to pick. Who should we bring onto this? My view was, well, LinkedIn can see behind the scenes who's active on LinkedIn. So just get LinkedIn to tell us who are the top 150 active people in the firm, and we'll start with them because that's a good starting point. Whereas the HR business, or the HR talent team said, no, here are 80 or so identified future business developers. What was interesting is very quickly the 80 future BD people kind of fell by the wayside. And we then worked with LinkedIn data to then bring in those that were more active on LinkedIn to do it. And that in itself was the starting to help prove that the way that you did things back then maybe is not the way that we need to do things moving forward. Nobody could have predicted what's happened in the last 15 months or so, which has really forced this change upon every organization on the planet. But that was an interesting kind of dynamic.
Better or worse.
Yeah, it was an interesting dynamic, and that's the other thing that I learned quickly is the beauty with those licenses is they were fluid. So the firm owned them. So if somebody after a couple of months just wasn't getting the best out of it, and I can see that from the analytics, it's like, cool, no worries, we'll take it off you and we'll go and give it to someone else, and we'll get to a point where we have a much better kind of well-oiled machine working together rather than wasting money or forcing people just to engage with something that they have zero interest in doing.
So what about training? We're kind of getting to that point, I think, anyway. But you mentioned one of the objections, if you will, initially was, well, you're great at LinkedIn, Alex, but what if everybody else sucks, for lack of a better word? And it sounds like that might have been the case with a few people. So what did you do? Was there formal training that you started putting in place? Slack groups or
Slack didn't exist.
Slack didn't exist back then. I'm trying to think what was around back
Yammer.
in 2016.
We just launched Yammer back then. Crikey.
There we go. Yeah.
That in itself was a challenge. Getting people off BlackBerries onto like an iPhone was a challenge.
Isn't it funny how much difference 5 years makes?
Yeah, exactly. So LinkedIn were brilliant in terms of supporting with kind of group classroom sessions. So kind of this is the mechanics of how the tool works, if you will. But it became evident very quickly that it had to be one-to-one hand-holding. That was the only real way that I could get the engagement. And because of the different levels of skills and expertise, but also more importantly, the different people marketing and selling to different people meant you kind of had to tailor it to them to make it relevant. Because the minute that they didn't feel it was relevant, and this is still true, this is still true today. The minute that someone doesn't think it's relevant for me, what's in it for me, how's this going to help me achieve my goals, you just lose people. So it was a combination of these are the mechanics of what you actually do, followed by just a lot of effort and hand holding back then to kind of move people along the cliched word journey, if we're going to use that.
Yep. Yeah. You've mentioned a few times that LinkedIn was very much part of this pilot campaign. Can you share a little bit about what their role was? What was their involvement in this campaign?
Yeah, absolutely. So Robert Fox was my account manager. He was absolutely amazing. Anita Windersman was our customer success manager. And they were just really supportive in terms of what we were doing, providing that training. Now, it helped that we were spending a not inconsiderable amount of money. So that meant
they were obviously interested in selling and getting sales navigator out there and making that case study.
Yeah, exactly. That gave us obviously access to more of their resource. But it had to be a blend. They had to, and this was the interesting piece, is that kind of bend to my will, if you will, because I wasn't allowing them to come in and do the cookie cutter approach as they would take with a typical SaaS tech company or a B2B company, because in professional services that just doesn't fly. And if you take that approach, you're going to lose people immediately. And that was like on session one, when they were talking about looking for sales leaders or marketing leaders, I was people going, we don't sell to sales leaders, we don't sell to marketing leaders. This tool's irrelevant. Because the realtors, the surveyors couldn't make that lateral move in their mind that it didn't actually matter what you're typing into the tool. You type in sales director or you type in property director, it's by the by, but they couldn't see that because they live and breathe property 24/7. So rapidly had to kind of work and help LinkedIn to shift that side of things in terms of when you talk to my people, you have to use real estate terminology. So here's the sort of things that you do. But that they moved to that very, very quickly. So yeah, it helps. But as we all know, if you spend more money with a company, they tend to offer you more help. So.
Yeah. So I get one question and with a follow up right after it, I suppose, is what did the social selling process, if you will, or framework look like back then? And then obviously times have changed. How do you, because obviously you haven't been at that company for a couple of years now, I believe, right? How do you believe that process would need to evolve to still be relevant and work today? Or maybe it doesn't.
Good question. And so is that one question or the question with the follow-up question?
I guess it's a question with a follow-up question. What was the process and how do you think it needs to evolve? I've learned I need to get both my questions out because otherwise Gabby will jump in and then we'll go down a different path.
Or he'll be notorious at interrupting me.
Or
worse, the guest. And then we fight about it after the show. So he's trying to get everything out right now, Alex,
exactly.
so that I don't get on his case after the show.
Right. That was like disorganized chaos, isn't it? Right. So, what are the principles of social selling? Actually, they remain the same to what they typically are today. Your personal brand, your network, and content. Very, very simple. So, your personal brand was when you meet someone for the first time online. And of course, back then it was different because we weren't so into the personal brand side of things. It was just make sure you got a half decent looking LinkedIn profile that makes you stand out from everybody else and you're, at least unique rather than just be another realtor, accountant, lawyer, what have you on LinkedIn. Your network is critical. Absolutely, because the bigger your network on LinkedIn, the bigger the network. In fact, any social channel doesn't have to be LinkedIn, but LinkedIn is obviously the go-to for most B2B organizations. So the larger your network, the larger network of influence you have, the larger network of referral opportunities you have, and more importantly, the larger the network of the organization in terms of connecting to their clients, the more powerful Sales Navigator becomes through Team Link and Team Link Extend in creating that virtual network, because Sales Navigator is actually only as good as the behavior of a company on LinkedIn. So if a company on LinkedIn isn't connecting, Sales Navigator can't magic those connections from thin air. And then the final piece was around content and making sure the content is relevant, is appropriate, and disseminated in a way that resonates with the audience. So that still remains true today. What's interesting, though, in terms of if you look at what's happening in the narrative around personal brand, it is becoming much, much more personal, much more kind of this is me, this is the person, this is what I stand for outside of the day job. We've seen in terms of what's happened over the last 15 to 18 months. We also have a new gen. Back then, I'll use the generational what have you, but they would have been at the start of their careers. Now we move forwards; they are further up the food chain, if you will, in terms of seniority and decision making, etc. Therefore, they have a different perspective on social. So that personal branding side of things, I think, is much more important. The network remains the same in terms of network. The content side of things, certainly on LinkedIn, is also pivoting. If we're going to use a cliche word again, is much more human, and actually the conversation is much more important on LinkedIn. Back then, 2015, 2016, you could probably get away with broadcast, whereas where we are now today, that just doesn't wash. That doesn't wash at all. We just ignore it. So it is very much the human conversation on LinkedIn to start those business conversations, and then bring those business conversations offline into either this virtual world that we find ourselves in this environment, or at some point face-to-face meetings and conferences. So those are probably the two biggest changes that I've noticed since doing it back then to where we are today. But the fundamental principles remain the same.
Yeah. And just for everyone listening, the campaign, what was the duration of the campaign?
Probably 15 months end to end. So I kind of had a 6 month lead up in terms of we're not measuring anything, because this needs to give people the get-go to get going, understand it, shift about those seats that we know aren't going to engage and so on. And then when I was happy with it, I was like, right, we're going to pull the trigger January through to December, because that's how they ran their financial year.
Okay. And again, just to reiterate those phenomenal stats. So in this 15-month, let's say the 12 months was really when you were measuring and when it was like really dialed up, $4.9 million in pipeline generated through probably one of the first social selling campaigns ever executed on LinkedIn at scale. In
the commercial real estate sector, there are organizations like SAP and Vodafone who've done it in their sectors, but certainly in the CRE sector, yes, we were the first.
Okay, thank you for that distinction. And all in all, at the end of the campaign, out of that 4.9 million pipeline, there was $500,000 in net new revenue. Is that correct?
Executed, invoiced, billed, done.
Wow.
Obviously, there could have been more after the fact.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Some of those deals could have converted after I'd gone, so it could have been more. But that's what I was able to, hand on heart, on paper, attribute to what I was doing.
And just out of curiosity, after that, 12 to 15 month time frame, and you reported these, the findings to your team and to your executives, what was some of the feedback that you had received from both the executives as well as your sales team that maybe, especially some of them that may have been reluctant or may have pushed back initially? What was some of the feedback that you heard?
Well, the fact that I was made redundant at the end of 2016 maybe says something, but that was more to our relationship with Europe and Brexit happening.
And for our American listening, made redundant means that you lost your job. You were let go.
I was asked to leave quietly with a check in my back pocket. It was interesting. Looking back, and it was an amazing time. It was too early. I was too early for them in terms of what was happening. And because of the uncertainty that the Brexit vote created within the commercial real estate sector, I wasn't the only one. And because I was also a round peg in a square hole, they couldn't really kind of understand that you were one of the highest paid national directors in the country, yet you weren't executing revenue yourself at the level that a national director should. And I was trying to argue that's not what you're paying me to do.
Mm-hmm.
And if I hadn't been here, then none of this would have happened. But it was just a challenging time for all businesses in terms of the uncertainty that vote had created. So I didn't take it to heart in terms of as a failure. It was just victim of circumstance, if you will. And without ironically that happening, Guy, the CEO, giving the platform to be able to do that was the launch pad to take me to where I am today, to enable me to sit here and conversations with such amazing people such as yourself, to be able to work for organizations such as Lately, because it gave me the framework and the framework to start with. Because then I went out on my own. I said, you know what, I'm not going back to the corporate space. I want to start consulting back into the business. I'm going to put into practice everything that I've learned over the last X years of my career, plus that piece with what have you. And I'm going to be the external consultant going in and doing that. So, yeah, it was still very much a success in my eyes, because I'd still be, I think, in a corporate machine somewhere, not necessarily enjoying life, rather than having a roller coaster. I mean, it's been pretty terrifying last 15 months, I'm not going to lie. But yeah, it's been an amazing 5 years since then. So I still see it as a success.
I see it as a tremendous success. I mean, what you orchestrated, the fact that you were going up against a lot of varying degrees of interest and people embracing it or pushing it away.
Resistance. More resistance than embracing, I would suggest, Gabby.
Right. But then doing something that has never been done at scale for your industry.
Yep.
Utilizing LinkedIn, which is, the 8,000 pound gorilla. They can kind of do what they want, say what they want, and yet they were really looking to partner with you and be a good steward of this campaign. So I think it's a tremendous success. I commend and applaud your outlook on what happened. And I love the way you Brits say "made redundant." It's just so much more eloquent than "I was fired" or "I got laid off." I had been made redundant a few times in my career, and it stings and it hurts, and it's a blow to your ego.
But nobody called it being made redundant, though.
No, not here. But I'm going to use the term. And it is a sting to one's ego. But the fact that you took that as an opportunity to launch your career and end up where you are today at Lately is phenomenal. Well, it's time for us to get to the point. Unless, Mike, you have another question.
No, actually, my question is pretty much going to be getting to the point.
Yeah.
So
let's get to the point.
Let's get to the point. So my question is really about really what you did was what's today called an employee advocacy campaign, social selling. Like it was SMEs and sellers going out there and talking about the company and themselves and whatnot. Mm-hmm. When you and I spoke earlier, you had mentioned that most employee advocacy campaigns fail. I'd love to have you talk about why do you believe they fail and how do you do it right? Like if someone's going to go do it now and do this thing today in 2021, what does it need to look like to not fail?
We've got another hour to do another podcast on this, Mike. So that's a big topic to get to the point on quickly. The biggest challenge with EA programs is the what's in it for me at the employee level. So if you're not actually going to an employee level, whether it's to support and augment a social selling program or just more broadly to activate the voice in the network of your employees, most of the time, if they don't even think that social media is relevant for them anyway, you're not going to get off to the races. And then B, it's why should I share this corporate stuff into my network? That's the thing. This is my network. My network aren't interested in what the corporate machine has got to say. Then the next layer is you then layer technology into this. The challenge with that is then is that another platform, another thing that I have to log into to do, or it's if they're prepared to then share the social post onto whatever channel it is that they are pushing it out to. The idea is that then the employee will personalize or add their own, human spin to that post. But we don't, because humans are lazy, right? We're lazy. We always look for the least path of resistance to do something. So then you have lots of employees just sharing exactly the same thing on social, which is what I then refer to as corporate vomit, because everyone is just sharing the same thing at the same time. It's even worse when you see it at an exec level. And I see it, you think, the CEO's actually put a bit of thought into that. And it's like, look, the CFO has got exactly the same on their post. Look, the CMO has got exactly the same on their post. No wonder this isn't working if the CMO can't even get this right. So it's I believe they think they've got a piece of technology which will then give them the quick fix to the solution to get more shit out there. Forgive my swearing. That's not what this is all about, but it's the employee has to understand at an individual level, why am I being asked to do it, and what's in it for me? Otherwise, I'm not going to do it. And more so now in terms of how LinkedIn's actually penalizing that. If you overpost on LinkedIn during the course of the week, your post will start to get suppressed. In terms of that, and the fact that LinkedIn actually is rewarding the conversation more than necessarily posting. You're better to run an EA program and have all your employees probably posting once a week, twice a week, max out of a tool, and then allow them to do more of the human conversation, all the likes and the comments over and above everything else. But that doesn't normally fit the narrative in terms of we need the views, the impressions, the likes. We need these big numbers to wow our executives who have no idea what it means. They go, oh, okay. That sounds good in terms of number of impressions and engagements. Going, move on to the next, and CMO goes, phew, save for another week.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned this a few times already. What do you believe is the benefit for the employee? As employers and thinking about businesses and companies out there, certainly we understand what the benefit is for the company owners, the leaders of the company. But what do you personally believe is the benefit for the individual to get out there on LinkedIn and to be active and also to not only be active in promoting themselves, but also active in elevating the brand voice of the company?
Well, it's the first, and also it depends on the employee in terms of where they sit. So from a sales perspective, for the most part, I'd hope it's pretty obvious as to why you need to be out there and active. But for everybody else, and this is the thing, it doesn't necessarily have to be for everyone. But if you're passionate and you care about the firm that you work for, you should be proud to be able to talk about the sort of the bigger things that they are that they're doing. And the firms that do get it right, they showcase talent, they showcase the employees that are out there in terms of, hey, this person's done this cool charity event, or this person's running this marathon, or this person's done a bake sale, and put it out there on social, because that then starts to make them feel more connected to the leadership team. And that's the other thing in terms of how that you can leverage almost on an internal aspect. It doesn't always have to be externally facing. Is creating that connectivity between leader and employee. Just think how powerful it is for the CEO just to like someone's post. Like the janitor's post or someone junior. That's so powerful from creating that employee engagement and the want to work for the firm. And this is what I always say to clients. I say, if your employees aren't prepared to talk about the things like diversity in the workplace or LGBTQ or Black Lives Matter online, you've got a much bigger problem culturally than trying to get an employee advocacy program off the ground, because that suggests to me your employees don't believe you. They don't believe the leadership in terms of what you're leading with purpose, which is now what we're hearing, and kind of ESG and sustainability. If they don't truly believe that that's what the company's doing, then they're not going to want to engage and share with the corporate message online if they don't believe it. And that then is a bigger cultural challenge that HR and talent and leadership need to tackle, and maybe have a long, hard look at themselves in the mirror, and just try to think about what is the culture of the organization and the business that we're trying to achieve. So that's where I see this all going, and where I see the benefits to the employee, that if they feel culturally engaged, that's a word I don't know, I've made that up, internally to the business, then they should want to do it once they know they've got the permission, which I haven't talked about. The permission is the big thing to do it, and show a bit of personality, show a bit of what have you. So an example of this is Sales Loft, brilliant organization. Tom Boston, go and find him. He was an SDR seller, brilliant at creating content, video content, very funny video content, and his leadership team allowed him to do it because it started to generate business, it started to generate leads, but then gave an insight to the culture of the company. He's now recently moved to a newly created role called social sales evangelist, and he's actually moved into marketing. So he's moved into the marketing function as a former salesperson to help start to bridge that that gap. I'm actually getting him on my podcast next week, I think, to record a series around that, to understand what that means and what that looks like.
It's interesting. There's been a lot of that because we're in the process of recruiting for a number of roles, and what I've been seeing is there's a lot of people moving into that kind of demand generation roles that are often former SDRs and BDRs.
Yep. Yeah.
And you kind of foreshadowed one of my other questions, Alex, and that is, what do you believe is the responsibility today of companies when it comes to educating or giving their team the tools to build a personal brand?
That's a really good question, because I think companies are going to be in for a rude awakening over the next 5 years or so with the next generation of employee coming through, especially Gen Alpha, who I think Generation Alpha is the teenagers at the moment. You see what's happening on TikTok. People always laugh at me about TikTok. You see what's happening on TikTok right now. It's nuts. So creativity, the expressivity, it's again late on a Friday at the end of the week here, is amazing. And some of the skills of these boys and girls is also incredible. So there's going to be an expectation that I'm allowed to do this and I want to do this. Of course, within the confines, that's the wrong word, but within the kind of the guidelines of you still represent us as fine, that it's almost the behavior change that's got to happen at the leadership level to understand that we need to kind of harness and bottle this creativity, if you will, and nurture it in a way that we can then benefit in an authentic way to help drive the brand. In terms of the tools, I mean, everyone's got a phone. TikTok, the editing facilities on TikTok and the filters and stuff is absolutely insane in terms of what you can create. But Instagram and so on, look at what look at what LinkedIn's doing. Cover story, creator mode, LinkedIn starting, this isn't Facebook. Why has LinkedIn got stories? Okay, new stories for you, but stories works across every other flipping platform. Even YouTube's gone down the short route in terms of YouTube Shorts, because they recognize this is how the next generation of employee communicate with each other.
Yeah.
Other conversation in terms of they can't seem to have physical human conversations with people. Different challenge, but
that's a topic for another time.
Now I have to actually shake hands and talk to a person in person. How do we do this?
Well, just to put a quick bow around the conversation here, what are, for anyone listening at this point, at this segment of the show, get to the point. We want to try to make it very easy for our guests listening to, they've heard your phenomenal case story, they've seen the proof of what it can do. And so what are some of the tips or recommendations that you would provide our listeners today on how they can start a, let's say, social selling, employee advocacy, personal branding, not campaign, but initiative. Thank you, Mike. At their company, what are some of those, very basic 5 tips or so that you feel are critical in getting something like this off the ground?
First and foremost, I'm more than happy to talk to anybody and give my advice on a one-to-one basis if that's helpful. Start small. I probably went a little too big when I was doing it back then in hindsight, but I'm typical salesperson. Let's shoot for the moon and then see what happens. Start small. Prove it, be brave, the whole Google, break things fast and move on. Accept that there will be failure, but that's fine as long as you move on and learn from that failure. Make it fun, enjoy it. It may well be a technology investment that is required, or it could well be you've already got the technology stack in place. You're just not using. You just don't know the capability of the stack that you already that you already have. So get in there, get amongst it, and start to just learn what is the art of the possible with this. That might then require some difficult conversations internally that we know it can do this. So allow us to do this, and permission from the top. The key thing is if you don't have that permission from the top, you're never going to get this off the ground. And if you can get a sponsor who's prepared to actually lead from the front and post some stuff on social and kind of go through what that feels like themselves, it'll be much easier. But just get started. Don't sit there and ah. You know, it's the old Chinese proverb: when was the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When's the best time to plant a tree? Now.
Yeah. What any favorite tools or resources that you feel are critical for getting started in this type of endeavor?
Lately, obviously.
Obviously.
Lately, obviously, for an employee advocacy play. And if anybody wants to find out why, then please get in touch with me and I can show you. Sales Navigator genuinely is the best lead gen tool out there on the planet by a country mile. It is pretty inexpensive in terms of the outcomes that it can generate for you in terms of pipeline, but that requires a behavior change around social. A half decent CRM system, and there are enough out there, and the attributes. So if you haven't got a code in whatever your CRM system is, which says this sale was generated through social, so you can then start to record that back then and start to give some proof points around pipeline. Remember, this is pipeline creation. This isn't about converting to win, although social can absolutely, and employee advocacy programs can help that. It's almost digital prospecting. And this was the argument when I was in my consulting world, when sales reps would go, okay, I'll get all this, but you know, how can I prove this works? And I said, hang on, no. This isn't about revenue in the bank. If your sales teams do what I say and listen to what I do and execute on that, they will generate pipeline. I'm not here to then help those salespeople and train those salespeople to convert that pipeline to a win and revenue. If you want sales trainers, I can go into my contact book and give you some sales trainers, but I'm helping you get that conversation started. If you don't back your sales team to convert, social hasn't failed, I haven't failed, Sales Navigator hasn't failed, or whatever the technology is, your sales processes or your sales ability and your sales talent has failed.
And one last question from me before we get to the lightning round. This one might be a little bit of a lengthier response from you, but I'm curious to your thoughts on this. For those listening today that are really saying, okay, you know what, I got to get my team out there. I got to enable them, give them the permission to have this personal brand, create content, and also weave that narrative of the company's story into their brand story, into their personal brand story. What do you believe are the types of training or resources or maybe some books or blogs that you think somebody out there that's new to this or may have a myopic view of what this needs to be? Where would you point them? What direction? What tools or resources would you point them into that direction?
Well, LinkedIn Learning just has, an abundance of how-to. A lot of it's free at the moment still, how-to videos on all of this. Subscribe to the LinkedIn marketing blog, subscribe to the LinkedIn sales blog. I'm more than happy to share my YouTube channel. It sounds very grand. I have no life outside of this, so I do record how-to videos in terms of getting the best out of LinkedIn. I can again give the links to this. There are loads of books out there. A brilliant book, one of the original pioneers on this by Timothy Hughes. Social selling for. My brain's gone. Look up Timothy Hughes on LinkedIn, and he's the forefather, if you will, on this book. Social media for game changers and change makers, or something to that effect. We'll put the links.
We'll link in the show notes.
We'll add all that good stuff. Well, Alex, it's been a phenomenal pleasure to hear about this campaign, to see the proof and learn from your experience. You're just as delightful in person as you are on social media. And I would say probably even funnier in person. We have the benefit of doing this, live rather than record. Well, it will be recorded for our listeners, but for us, it's live. So we get to see you sort of at your most raw, and it's just been delightful. You've brought a lot of value and exciting conversation to our show. It is time now for the lightning round. Mike.
Lightning round. All right. A couple of quote unquote rapid fire questions. So what is the main KPI you use to evaluate marketing success?
Money.
What's a new marketing strategy or tactic you're looking forward to testing out this year?
Dynamic guided selling.
Okay. We'll have to turn into Death of a Salesman to know what that really is.
Seth Mars, he's one of the analysts from Forrester talking about it. He's already on there, guest on there. It's out there in the raw, so you can learn more about that.
Okay, excellent.
What is a tool or platform you use in your work that you couldn't live without?
Well, that's a tough one. Lately, obviously, outside of that, Sales Navigator.
Okay.
What is your least favorite business word or phrase?
Pivot. Pivot.
It means so many different things to so many different people.
It means only one thing. It means only one thing. If your listeners don't know what that one thing means, then shame on them.
Then
that's the funny part.
Bugger off, right? Bugger off.
What is your favorite podcast?
My First Millions.
Okay.
And along the same lines, what is your favorite business or marketing book?
Getting Naked by Patrick Ciccone.
Is that a business book? It sounds a little risque.
Google it. See what comes up.
We'll have to look into that one.
Add it to the show notes. And who is a B2B marketing expert you admire on LinkedIn?
Justin Michael.
Okay, we don't know Justin Michael. We'll have to look him up.
You need to get Justin Michael on this show. He will blow your brain. Go to salesborg.ai.
All right. Is he also from the UK?
No, he's from Your Fair Isle, the US.
Oh, excellent. Well, we'll have to look him up. Justin, if you're listening, we're coming for you on LinkedIn. All right. Be warned. Yes. All right. A couple of bonus questions here for you, Alex. Twitter versus LinkedIn.
Different audiences.
Okay. Favorite British band?
The Prodigy.
Okay. How do you take your tea?
Milk and sugar.
Black, I'm assuming, right?
No, milk and sugar. That's an English thing. How do you take
I'm
your
sorry.
tea?
I mean black tea. I mean like Darjeeling, Indian black tea.
No.
Right?
Oh my days. Tea.
Tea. Okay.
English tea. All the fancy stuff. I have my tea, milk, and one sugar, and the milk goes in once the tea bag has been taken out. None of this horribleness of putting the milk in when the tea bag's still in there. So PG tips, Yorkshire tea, a dash of milk once the tea bag is out with a splash of sugar. That's how I take my tea.
And there you have it, folks. If you're ever in England, don't you dare make that mistake. All right, soccer question, because we know you are a soccer fan, football fan. Sorry about that. Mate, who is your favorite all-time football player?
I don't really follow football, if I'm honest. Sorry to break the. I don't. I'm more of a Formula One fan, so I can give you my best.
Let's go with that. Who's your favorite Formula One driver?
I think probably Nigel Mansell back in the day in the 80s with his moustache.
Okay. I also saw that you enjoy downhill skiing. So where was your favorite skiing ski slopes? Where do you hit the slopes?
Had to be where I honeymooned with my wonderful wife, Nicola. I went to Vale and then Breckenridge for 2 weeks. It was unbelievable. Probably Breck. Absolutely love Breck. An amazing time out there. Imperial chair, for those that know, you hike to the top and it's an immense downhill all the way to the bar.
Lovely. Well, Alex, it's been a delight to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for joining us. Where can our listeners connect with you?
LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok.
And YouTube, you mentioned.
And YouTube, yeah, thank you.
You really don't have much of a life. You better take that wife of yours and go skiing sometime soon. Well, thank you so much, Alex. We enjoyed having you on the show today. This is one of our favorite topics, something that we think more companies need to be embracing today and encouraging and unleashing their team in social selling, but also employee advocacy and building a personal brand. So thank you so much. Delightful to have you on. And everyone listening, we look forward to having you back here again, same time next week on Show Me the Proof, Get to the Point.
Thanks for tuning in to the Show Me the Proof, Get to the Point podcast. Join us weekly for new episodes and seriously smart B2B marketing success stories. We'll show you the proof and get to the point every time. Find additional resources on the Proofpoint website, www.proofpoint.marketing, including the full episode library with show notes, guides, templates, and more great resources. If you like this episode, don't forget to subscribe, and please leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts.